So now I'd like to plunge into the depravity of the meetings this week between the war criminals Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington. So let's get started with that. Now, he was in Washington, BB. I hate using that word because it makes him sound like a cuddly toy when he's really the embodiment of evil. Netanyahu was in Washington for 4 days this week. This was his third trip to the White House since Trump returned there in January. To my knowledge, no other world leader has visited the White House that many times in the past 5 months. I'm not even sure that there's a world leader who's visited the White House twice in the past 5 months, let alone 3 times. Maybe Zelensky, another proxy of the United States, but hey, certainly not 3. Now, neither Netanyahu nor Trump revealed much information about what Netanyahu and Trump agreed during those 4 days. It's not clear that they came to any concrete binding understandings at all, but we do have some information, and we'll come back to that question in a moment. I just want to touch upon something that happened to Israel and Netanyahu while Netanyahu was in Washington to meet the Donald, and that is that the Israeli genocide forces suffered a devastating attack by the forces of the resistance. On Tuesday, July 8th, a complex ambush carried out by the resistance killed at least 5 Israeli terrorists and wounded at least 14 other Israeli terrorists. The Israeli media reported that they were all killed by roadside bombs, but videos and statements released by the resistance strongly suggest that that is only part of the story. It appears from video evidence that has emerged, that has been provided by the resistance, that after the roadside bombs went off, there was an extended firefight on the ground between the Israeli terrorists who survived the explosion of the roadside bombs and resistance forces on the ground. The resistance claims that the firefight went on for some time as it ambushed Israeli terrorists who came to assist those that had been hit by the first ambush. I'm going to show you some video that was released by the resistance. I'm going to try to just give you a bit of a glimpse because YouTube tends to react negatively when one shows videos such as these, but this will give you, it's unfortunately of poor quality, understandable in the conditions in which the resistance is fighting, but here's some of what appears in the video that they published. And you'll see there are soldiers falling down there. Apparently they are fleeing from a hail of bullets. I can see down in the lower left-hand corner that there's something written in Hebrew. I don't know what it means, but now that I'm having seen that, I remember that the Israeli media reported that it was the Israelis who published this video. So I'm not entirely sure that this video was published by the resistance. It might have been published by the Israelis. In any case, you can see very clearly, it appears that they are trying to evade bullets. So it wasn't just that there were roadside bombs that went off, but that it's quite clear that there was a firefight that went on for some time. And what is questionable in light of the video evidence that has emerged is, the official death toll or casualty toll. As I mentioned, the Israelis claim that the number of terrorists, of course they don't call them terrorists, I do, who were killed in this ambush was 5, and that the number who were injured was 14. But this video evidence and other video evidence that has emerged raises serious questions about whether or not the numbers were that low, especially when you consider that the explosions, the IED explosions alone probably took out 5 or 6 soldiers. And then there may well have been further soldiers who were killed, Israeli terrorists, I should say, in the firefights that followed. So Netanyahu had to speak publicly about this while he was in Washington. I'm sure that uh, didn't help in his case to the Donald that the Israeli genocide forces are close to achieving their purported goal of eliminating Hamas. Um, and in fact, I think when you look in the broader context of what has happened in the last couple of months, it is really difficult to argue with a straight face that the Israeli genocide forces are on the verge of defeating Hamas. First of all, this attack, this ambush, occurred in Beit Hanun. And as we have discussed previously on Reason to Resist, when we talked about another ambush that happened some months ago in Beit Hanun is in the north eastern corner of the Gaza Strip. It is right across from the Israeli settlement of Sderot. In fact, when I was in Palestine in, I think it was May of last year, and I wasn't able to get into Gaza. I tried to enter through numerous points and I couldn't, but I did manage to sit on a hill between Sderot and Beit Hanun, and it was on the Israeli side or the occupied side of the concentration camp fence that the Israelis have erected around the Gaza Strip. And I could see Beit Hanun. It was right before me, and I could see the bombs falling in Beit Hanun. So if you look at a map, you know, without you don't even have to be a military expert to understand that given its geographical location, Beit Hanun is the one area, perhaps more than any other, that the Israelis should have been able to control completely by now, because you know it's got Israeli military bases and settlements to the north and to the east of it, and it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the concentration camp fence and this substantial settlement of Sderot. So even Beit Hanun has not been controlled by the genocide forces after 21 months of barbarism of unspeakable proportions. If they can't, you know, secure Beit Hanun, there's no reason to believe that they can secure on a permanent basis any part of the Gaza Strip. So I want to just show you another thing that happened. This, I think, was an event that occurred just after Netanyahu left Washington, or it might have been around the time that he left Washington. The 10th soldier, or terrorist, I should say, on the Israeli side, who has been killed in the month of July, was revealed to the public by the Israeli genocide forces. His name was Ray Biran. Here in the headline of this Jerusalem Post article, he is said to have been a captain. In fact, he was a squad commander, but he didn't have the rank of captain. They gave him the rank of captain posthumously, shortly after his death. And as I say, he was the 10th Israeli terrorist to have been killed in the Gaza Strip in July. And there's some interesting commentary about him in the Israeli media. According to the Jerusalem Post, he was killed, quote, during a battalion operation while troops were demolishing buildings. According to Army radio, troops were rigging buildings suspected of serving as terrorist infrastructure with explosives. In other words, they were demolishing civilian infrastructure. Because, as we all know by now, Israel suspects that every single building in Gaza is used by so-called terrorists. The explosives with which they had rigged these buildings set off about 2 hours after the buildings were rigged, killing the terrorist. And the IDF, the Jerusalem Post says, is still investigating the incident. And the Jerusalem Post quoted the terrorist's surviving brother, who is a reservist in Israel's genocide forces. The brother claimed that the dead terrorist was principled. Principled, sure. That's why he was blowing up civilian infrastructure at the time that he was killed and participating in the most brazen genocide in human history. The squad commander, as I mentioned, this individual was the 10th to be killed in Gaza in July. As we previously reported, June was the deadliest month for Israel's genocide forces in Gaza during the past year. So let me pull up on the screen here some data that was compiled. I believe this was by Haaretz, the liberal Israeli newspaper. And you'll see that at the top is June 2025. There were 20 soldiers reported killed by Israel. Okay, so who knows what the actual number is, but that's what the Israelis acknowledge. And you have to go all the way back to June of 2024, over a year ago, for a casualty count that was as high or higher than the casualty count from June of this year. So as I mentioned, this individual who was killed by Israeli explosives, this terrorist, was posthumously declared a captain, was the 10th Israeli soldier killed in the month of July. So we are on a pace, not we, but the resistance is on a pace to inflict more casualties on Israel's genocide forces in the month of July than it inflicted on them in the month of June 2025. So the trend is clearly upwards, as you can see from this computation, which was compiled by Haaretz. In March, February it was 2, March 0. I'm talking about 2025, the top half of the chart. This was the period when the ceasefire was in effect, the one that the Israelis tore up like toilet paper. And then the casualties began as the combat revived to inch upwards. 3 in April, 6 in May, then a big jump to 20 in June. And at this pace, as I mentioned, we are likely to see more casualties for the Israeli genocide forces in July than in June. This hasn't anything about it that looks like a victory or a trajectory towards victory for Israel's genocide forces. Whether that actually caused the Trump administration to, put real pressure on Netanyahu to put an end to this slaughter, that's another question altogether. And we're going to come back to that in a moment. What exactly was achieved during these 4 days of the War Criminals Summit? So, sorry for the pause. I just have to find my bearings here. So, what do we know about the outcome of the War Criminals Summit? Well, we know that no ceasefire has been agreed up until now. So Netanyahu left Washington a few days ago. It was widely reported that one of the main reasons for which he was there was to speak to the Donald about the terms of a ceasefire. And we heard from the Trump administration and the Donald himself repeatedly before Netanyahu arrived in Washington for this most recent trip that Israel had agreed to the terms of a ceasefire. And with his, typical bellicosity, Trump said, Hamas better accept it, or, it's going to be even worse for the Palestinians in Gaza than it has been thus far. Hard to imagine how anything could be worse than what the Palestinians are currently enduring, Mr. Trump. In any case, it doesn't appear that, in fact, Israel had agreed to the terms of a ceasefire, certainly not to terms that the Palestinians could accept. So it looks like what we have called on Reason to Resist repeatedly a kabuki theater continues. The endless kabuki theater about a ceasefire. Why are they doing this? Why are they constantly raising the question of whether the belligerents, or I should say the victims of the genocide and the perpetrators of it, are on the verge of an agreement, and that Witkoff is going off to West Asia and he's meeting with the mediators, and the Qataris and the Egyptians are sitting down with the representatives of the resistance, and Netanyahu is having a cabinet meeting where they're going to talk about this has been going on for 22 months, and there has been no final permanent end to this genocide, no real ceasefire. I mean, even the last one, Israel violated it 6 ways from Sunday from the very beginning. They just simply, reduced the pace, the rate at which they were slaughtering Palestinian civilians for a period of several weeks, and managed in the process to secure the release of a number of prisoners of war. But it wasn't actually a true ceasefire. There hasn't ever been a true ceasefire in 22 months. And, if I had $1 for every article that has been published by the Western media claiming that we were on the verge of a ceasefire, I'd be richer than Bill fucking Gates. It's the most ridiculous thing. It's been a tidal wave of propaganda. Why? Why has there been this tidal wave of propaganda? Because, for public relations purposes, the Biden administration and now, or I should say the Biden regime, and now the Trump regime and the Netanyahu regime, all of them have an interest in persuading the public, and particularly people in the West, upon whose support Israel depends for its very existence, that these characters are actually serious about bringing the slaughter to an end. And they're really trying hard. They just can't get, across the goal line because the Palestinians are being unreasonable. That's the narrative, but they have no desire whatsoever to bring the slaughter to an end. Absolutely none. So what was actually accomplished, if anything, during this theater? Well, let's have a look at an article from Haaretz, which was published while the war criminal Netanyahu was meeting with the war criminal Trump. This article was published on July 10th, so this would have been on Thursday, would have been the end of the 4 days. And Haaretz reported, with no breakthroughs from Netanyahu's meetings with Trump, the Qatar truce talks await Witkoff. Let me just pause here and say something about Witkoff. Witkoff is a war criminal. Witkoff is a con man. Witkoff is a liar. Witkoff participated in this fraud that was perpetrated on Iran. When the Trump regime claimed to be serious about continuing to negotiate with Iran, and they had set a meeting for Sunday, and then 2 or 3 days before that meeting, Israel launched a criminal war of aggression against Iran with every imaginable form of support from the Trump regime. Witkoff participated in that fraud. He was a key player in that fraud. What the hell has Witkoff accomplished? This real estate con man from New York City, who's been jetting off to Ukraine and to Moscow and to, Doha and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Cairo. What has he accomplished? He's accomplished absolutely nothing. Neither of the two wars that he was supposedly tasked with ending shows any sign of respite. The Ukraine war is proceeding as fiercely, as violently as ever. There's absolutely no indication that that is going to be resolved by means of negotiation, although it could very easily be done if the Americans and the Europeans were serious about addressing Russia's legitimate concerns. And there's no indication, even Haaretz acknowledges it, that there's any kind of a breakthrough in these so-called negotiations between Palestinian representatives and the representatives of the genocidal entity. So he's failed utterly, Witkoff, to achieve any of the diplomatic objectives which were supposedly set for him, and he's participated in fraudulent behavior. He has been one of the most prominent actors in this kabuki theater. One might even say that since Trump returned to the White House, Witkoff has been the star of the kabuki theater. I mean, give the man an Oscar, but he is absolutely unfit to deliver peace to either of those war-torn regions, and that is in fact not his mandate. His mandate is to maintain the pretense that the Trump regime is serious about bringing these wars to an end. So please, let's just cast Witkoff onto the trash heap of human history, shall we? And put an end to all this talk about how he's a peace envoy. Now, according to the Haaretz article, and I'm quoting here, Netanyahu wants an explicit commitment from the U.S. that he can resume the war in Gaza, which he can then use to buy the support of Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. It appears that Trump gave him such consent verbally. Netanyahu wants it in writing. Such a commitment would satisfy the prime minister. In other words, the war criminal Netanyahu wants to resume his genocide after Israel has recovered its prisoners of war from resistance groups in the Gaza Strip. Now, an obvious question here is, why would the Palestinians give up the best leverage they have if Netanyahu is free to resume the genocide? And they're not even being, you know, coy about it. This is appearing in the Israeli press that their intention is to resume the genocide. What Palestinian with, a functioning brain would say, yeah, we're going to hand over all the prisoners of war when you can just continue to slaughter us mercilessly once you've recovered them? And notice that the press continues, including Haaretz, to refer to Israel's genocide as a war. And by doing that, they're obscuring how outrageous Israel's position is. They say Israel wants to be free to continue the war, but in fact, it wants to be free to continue a genocide. And when you frame it in that way, the grotesque unreasonableness of Israel's position becomes immediately apparent. Calling it a war allows Israel to appear much more reasonable than it actually is being. Palestinians, by the way, have no legal or moral obligation to make concessions in order to secure Israel's commitment to end the genocide. Whatever concessions the Palestinians do or do not make, Israel has an obligation to bring it to an end immediately and to hold accountable all the Israelis who perpetrated this genocide and to make reparations to the Palestinians for what they have done. The Palestinians aren't obliged to make any concessions to get that from Israel. That is Israel's profound moral and legal duty under international law. The negotiating position of the resistance, in fact, is incredibly reasonable. They are not seeking a commitment from Israel to end the occupation. It is true that they want Israeli forces out of the Gaza Strip, and it is true that they want the siege to be brought to an end. Again, these are obligations that Israel has, irrespective of any concessions which the Palestinians make or do not make. But they have not demanded that Israel end the occupation of the West Bank as a condition of releasing the hostages. They have not demanded that Israeli settlements be dismantled in the West Bank, or even that the expansion of those settlements be terminated as a condition of releasing the prisoners of war. They have not demanded that Israel give the Palestinian people a state as a condition of releasing the prisoners of war. So in fact, all they've demanded are things, some of the things, not all of the things, some of the things that Israel is obliged to do anyways. I mean, last year, the International Court of Justice, in addition to rendering an opinion on the plausibility of Israel's genocide, in another advisory opinion, said that Israel has an obligation to end the occupation immediately. So whether or not the Palestinians release any prisoners of war or make any concessions of any other kind, the genocidal entity, has an obligation to remove its forces from the West Bank, not only the Gaza Strip, from the West Bank. And yet the resistance is not demanding that they do that as a condition of releasing the prisoners of war. So the position of the resistance is incredibly reasonable in every single respect, including their demand that they be permitted to retain their weapons. When they've tried, peaceful resistance. They tried it, for example, during the Great March of Return in 2018-19, when Trump was in the White House the first time around. And, when civilians, women, children, disabled persons were approaching the concentration camp fence, trying to return to their homeland, which is their right in international law, the Israeli sniper sat there in broad daylight and gunned them down mercilessly, committing war crime after war crime, and nobody was held accountable for that. So they've tried peaceful resistance, but the West will allow Israel to commit any form of depravity and continue to support it in every imaginable way. So they need the weapons in order to protect themselves. It's really the only protection they have. And they have a right to armed resistance in these circumstances in international law. Israel has no business telling them that they have to disarm, given the way that it behaves. So there's nothing at all, nothing about the negotiating stance of the Palestinians that is unreasonable. In fact, they should and could demand far more of Israel as a condition of releasing the prisoners of war, but they haven't. And yet the Western media are constantly trying to persuade us that it is the Israelis who are being reasonable and it is the Palestinians who are being excessive. So What happened after Netanyahu came home? Well, there was further reporting by the Western press, which suggested that the just bear with me here, which suggested that the report of Haaretz on July 10th was accurate. And here I'd like to show you a Wall Street Journal article or headline from a Wall Street Journal article. Well, actually, this is related to a separate subject. Haaretz talked about, Israel insisting on having the ability to resume the so-called war after obtaining the release of the hostages, the remaining hostages. The Wall Street Journal reports that Netanyahu got something else, that he got a signal of support from the Trump regime, Netanyahu, to attack Iran if Iran moves toward a nuclear weapon, something which, U.S. intelligence agencies themselves say Iran was not seeking before it was attacked by Israel and the United States. So this raises an interesting question, which is, what is Israel going to do with that green light that it has gotten? Here's the reality. The reality is that despite the West and Israel having deployed the most advanced air defense systems that they have, and having fired off probably thousands of, extraordinarily expensive missiles from their air defense batteries during the 12-day war with Iran, Iran inflicted very serious damage. It took out one of the two oil refineries in Israel, the largest one, which produces twice as much as the other in Ashdod. And it's currently out of action, and who knows when it will be back up and running. They struck the so-called Ministry of Defense. They struck the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. They struck Mossad. They struck the Weizmann Institute, the technological backbone of the genocidal military. And it has emerged, thanks to satellite data revealed by the University of Oregon researchers, that they also struck 5 Israeli military bases. And after that satellite data was provided to the UK's Telegraph a few days ago, the Israeli military was compelled to acknowledge that Iran managed to struck 5 military bases. And you can be sure that those military bases were supposedly protected by the best air defense systems that Israel, the United States, and other Western countries could deploy. In these circumstances, as I've said, I think Israel is caught between its hubris and its fear. On the one hand, it is, frothing at the mouth, chomping at the bit to continue the war against Iran. But on the other hand, the saner people, if there are any left in the Israeli political and military elite, know that Iran will retaliate and that it will be devastating, perhaps far more devastating than what Israel has sustained thus far. And another interesting satellite image emerged, which showed that the Iranians, although Trump claimed that when Iran retaliated to the U.S. attack on its nuclear facilities, it didn't do any damage to the U.S. air base in Qatar. There's a satellite image which has come out, which shows that, in fact, the Iranians destroyed a very sophisticated radar system right in the heart of that military base. You can go to the one place you can find the imagery is on in the X account of Will Shriver, a military analyst whom I follow. But there's other places you can find it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to pull it up before I started today. But it seems quite clear that, in fact, that was a very precise strike on a valuable piece of military hardware. So if Israel is crazy enough, and it certainly is, to attack Iran again, there's every indication that the price is going to be severe. But I don't have any illusions for 1 second, neither should you, that Israel is going to do it anyways. Just a question of when and how. Now, something else that's been happening in the background is that there have reports emerging that the People's Republic of China has provided air defense systems to the Islamic Republic So I'm going to show you just bear with me here, an article from Middle East Eye, which appeared a few days ago. And according to Middle East Eye, Iran has received Chinese surface-to-air missile batteries after the Israeli ceasefire deal. And whether, in fact, that is the case remains unclear. The article from the Middle East Eye cited an Arab official familiar with the intelligence that Chinese air defense equipment had been sent to Iran after it struck a truce with Israel last month. However, a few days later, the Chinese embassy in Israel issued a statement. And this is what the statement said. The embassy finds the contents of the report to be incorrect. And I believe they're referring here to the Middle East Eye report. And they continue, as a matter of principle, China firmly opposes the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and their delivery systems and continuously strengthens its enforcement capabilities regarding non-proliferation. China never exports weapons to countries engaged in warfare and maintains strict controls on the export of dual-use items. As a permanent member of the UN Security Council, China upholds a cautious and responsible approach to the export of military-related goods. Now, when I first read this article, this statement, I looked at it long and hard, read it a few times, and came to the conclusion that it actually isn't a clear denial that Iran has received Chinese air defense systems. So why do I say that? Well, the statement says the contents of the report are incorrect. Well, does that mean that everything in the report is incorrect? There are only certain aspects of it that are incorrect. And if it's only certain aspects of it, which aspects? We don't know. The embassy could have eliminated any ambiguity by simply saying, rather than saying the contents of the report are incorrect, the embassy could have said, we have not provided air defense systems to the Islamic Republic, period. But that's not what the statement said. The second thing is that the Chinese embassy in Israel stated that China never exports weapons to countries engaged in warfare. Well, one could argue that since the ceasefire went into effect with Israel, that Iran is not engaged in warfare against Israel, and Israel is not engaged in warfare in Iran. So the way I look at it, this doesn't amount to a clear and unambiguous denial by the Chinese government that they've provided air defense systems to the Islamic Republic. Now, there's been another development in this regard, and that is that in, this would be July 11th, so we're talking yesterday. At least this is when the article I'm going to tell you about appeared. It appeared in an Israeli media outlet called Israel Hayom. And the title of the article is "A Lie Repeated 1,000 Times is Still a Lie. China's Israel Envoy Hits Back." And in his first major interview with Hebrew media, Ambassador Zhao Junzheng rejects claim that Iran is rearming with the help of Beijing, following reports on missile shipments and potential J-10 aircraft deals. I'm going to come back to that in a moment, the J-10 aircraft. The envoy, well, let me just say right now, and you may well know this, there have been numerous reports in the last few days that the Iranians have agreed to purchase advanced fighter jets, J-10 aircraft deals, which were recently used by Pakistan in its brief war with India, reportedly. So he addresses the Chinese ambassador to the genocidal entity these two claims, that they've provided air defense systems and that they've agreed to provide J-10 fighter aircraft to the Islamic Republic. And this is what he says to Israel Hayom. The Chinese ambassador, quote, "I can tell you for sure that the Middle East Eye report is completely groundless." Ambassador Zhao stated emphatically when asked about recent allegations, quote, "The Chinese side stands against the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and its delivery systems. We strictly restrict the export of missiles, the related items, and technologies." And then he goes on to say, when he's talking now specifically about the J-10 aircraft, and it's very interesting the language he uses. He says, quote, In my personal view, there's no need for Israel to worry about this. Naturally, the amorphous answer could be subject to interpretation, says Israel Hayom. And they note that the Chinese Defense Ministry might have different views, because after all, what the ambassador said is that this is his personal view. And he didn't actually say the J-10 aren't going to be delivered to Iran. What he said was, there's no need for Israel to worry about this. Well, what does that mean? Nevertheless, reports document, this is the Israel Hayom article I'm now reading, reports documenting China-Iran commercial relationships supporting Tehran's missile programs predate the war in Iran. The Wall Street Journal reported June 5th that Iran ordered massive ammonium perchlorate quantities from China, a critical missile industry component, sufficient for hundreds of missile productions. And then further down in the article, it states, Zhao blames such reports on anonymous sources. We have noticed for some time now that some anonymous sources have been cited to make baseless speculations and vilification against China, spreading rumors such as China provides weapons to Iran, China helps Iran to restore ballistic missile capabilities, and China-Iran military cooperation harms Israel's national security. A lie repeated 1,000 times is still a lie. Nonetheless, I think that the totality of this article leaves open the question about whether China is going to provide J-10 fighter aircraft to Iran. And I would think my strong suspicion is they're going to do that. And that's precisely why the ambassador used this mealy-mouthed language and stressed that he was only expressing his personal opinion. One thing I must say, which really troubled me about this article, is that the ambassador was really quite complimentary towards Israel and put the emphasis on the desire, as he claimed, of the People's Republic of China to maintain good relations with Israel. So, for example, he said, according to Israel Hayom, I exchange views with many Israeli friends. Some of them are encouraged by Israel's military success in its fighting with Hezbollah, Hamas, and during the Israel-Iran conflicts. They told me that now Israel, for the first time, enjoys a safer geopolitical environment in the past maybe 20 or 30 years. But at the same time, some Israeli friends tell me that, yes, the military success is one thing, but how to transfer the military success into political success and strategic success is another thing. And he continues, the ambassador, saying, we respect Israel's right to subsistence and development. We are against some slogans by some people in some countries about wiping Israel out of the map of the world. And he goes on to talk about the history of diplomatic relations between the People's Republic of China and the genocidal entity. Now, to be fair, his job is to be the People's Republic of China's representative in Israel. And what other representatives of the Chinese government say, in other contexts, people who are more senior than this ambassador, certainly suggest strong support by the People's Republic of China for Iran, for the Palestinians and their right to self-determination. And there has been ample criticism articulated by the People's Republic of China at the highest level against Israel's genocidal conduct. But nonetheless, I really remain at a loss to understand. And I've pushed back hard for years against the vilification of the People's Republic of China by Western political elites and by the corporate media. Nobody can allege that I'm biased against China. That would be, absurd to make that claim based upon the record of my advocacy. But man, I can't understand why the People's Republic of China continues to talk this way about Israel. Israel is an international rogue. It's a criminal of the worst kind. It has caused every manner of suffering in the region. It is in possession of nuclear weapons. It's a very threat to the existence of humanity. And China has a legal and moral obligation to sanction Israel. So does Russia. All states do, particularly after the International Court of Justice ruled in January of 2024 that it is plausible that Israel is committing genocide. China and Russia are signatories to the Genocide Convention, and under Article 1, they have an obligation to prevent genocide. It's crystal clear that not only is there a potential genocide happening, but there is a genocide happening. What are they doing to bring it to an end other than blowing off steam at the United Nations or in the International Court of Justice? They could actually impose a very significant penalty, particularly China, one of Israel's largest trading partners, by imposing a trading embargo on Israel. And that would have an absolutely negligible impact on the Chinese economy because it's so big. But they could do some real damage to the Israeli economy by imposing sanctions. So, I really can't understand why the ambassador is speaking this way. And frankly, he deserves to be condemned for it. And the Chinese government deserves to be condemned for authorizing him, as it apparently did, to speak in such friendly terms with the genocidal entity. So I just had to get that off my chest. I mean, frankly, enough is enough. So let's move on. What does all of this mean? It means that I think we can safely say that the war between Israel and Iran is not over, but when and how that war will resume obviously is an open question. Israel clearly needs to bolster its air defenses. It was reportedly running out of air defense missiles, and even when it had them, a number of these ballistic missiles got through and did serious damage to the genocidal entity. So it definitely needs to bolster them, but the fact is that there is no Western military that has the ability to take down hypersonic missiles consistently, which the Islamic Republic has, quite possibly in abundance. And furthermore, the more time Israel takes to strengthen its air defense systems, the more the Islamic Republic will have an opportunity to strengthen its own air defense systems and its own military capabilities, and replenish its stocks of ballistic missiles and drones. So the genocidal entity, when it comes to Iran, is stuck between a rock and a hard place. I think we should expect there will be further aggression of many different types by Israel and the United States and other Western states against the Islamic Republic. But I also think we can expect that that's going to end very badly for Israel. Now, I want to move on before I talk about this extraordinary Jeffrey Epstein saga to talk about two other things. And that is, there has been a massive data leak involving Israeli military personnel. This is quite something. So let's just get rid of this. And let me pull up an article from Al Mayadeen. Sorry, that's the wrong article. Apologies. Data of thousands of Israelis with military ties leaked in hack. This was published yesterday. So what exactly does the article have to say? A hacker group, I'm quoting, has exposed the personal information of thousands of Israelis with ties to elite military and intelligence units in what experts are calling one of the most alarming cyber breaches in recent years. The leak includes resumes with names, emails, phone numbers, and in some cases, addresses belonging to individuals with sensitive roles in Israel's security apparatus. Wow. And the article goes on and says, among those affected are former intelligence officers, cyber warfare experts, drone operators, and engineers from elite units such as Unit 8200 and Unit 81, as well as personnel linked to the Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of Security. The breach reportedly originated over a year ago via the recruitment platform JobInfo or one of its third-party affiliates. So people were posting, military personnel, intelligence personnel were posting their most personal information on some job search website. And the breach was only made public last month. Haaretz, which verified a significant portion of the data. So this isn't just Al Mayadeen, which is obviously pro-resistance. This is being confirmed by Haaretz and other Israeli and Western media sources, Haaretz, which verified a significant portion of data, contacted 250 individuals whose information was leaked. Not a single person reported being notified by Israeli authorities. Wow. So these people who, would be prime targets for the resistance, and anybody who's infuriated by the genocidal rampage that Israel has been conducting before the eyes of the world the last 22 months, they've had their most personal information, where they live in some cases, has been obtained and leaked. And the Israeli military, instead of notifying them, or Israeli intelligence, and saying, hey, man, people know where you live, they don't even bother to notify them. I mean, we're talking here about, Keystone Cops level of incompetence and stupidity, folks. Just amazing. Now, I want to say something personal to all of you listening out there about this revelation. As you know, I'm a lawyer, and I devote a very significant amount of my time to prosecuting claims against Zionist organizations and individuals. I'm currently part of a team of lawyers prosecuting a claim under the Genocide Convention against the Canadian government on behalf of 2 Palestinian Canadians who've lost many family members in Gaza. And we're alleging that Canada has violated its obligation under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, is also violating its duties to these individuals under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a constitutional document, a Bill of Rights. And I also defend many cases being brought against Palestinians in Canada and by supporters of the Palestinian cause. I do all of this work on a pro bono basis. Now, I have been wanting for some time to identify Canadian citizens who have participated in this genocide in the service of Israel's military or intelligence forces. And I'm most anxious to examine this material because I want to see what, if anything, it reveals about Canadian citizens who have participated in these crimes, so that we can prosecute claims against them in the Canadian courts. However, and I must say I haven't had time to look too much because I only learned about this article last night, about this leak last night. I haven't been able to actually find the leaked documents online. So if any of you out there knows where the actual leaked documents and data can be found, please contact me. Please let me know so that we can build a case against Canadian citizens, war criminals, the monsters out there who have participated with the tacit consent of the Canadian government in this satanic project. I would love nothing more than to be able to identify these people and put evidence before a court of law demonstrating that they participated in the genocide. So if you can help us to track down this data, this leaked information, please do that. One way you can contact me, you can write something in the comments section to this video. You can also go to my website, dimitrilascaris.org, and there's a contact form there. As I say, if any of you know where this information can be found, please do share that information with us so that we can bring these people to justice in Canada. Now, let me move on to actually, there is one other item I wanted to talk to you about before we move on to the grotesque Epstein saga. And that is news that Israeli settlers just beat to death an American. That's right, folks. And this is an article from, I'm reading from an article in Al Jazeera that was published yesterday. Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank have beaten to death a 20-year-old United States citizen. The victim's family members and rights groups have said settlers attacked and killed Seyfola Musalet in the town of Sinjil, north of Ramallah, on Friday in the occupied West Bank, where the settlers have no right to be. They are, in fact, participating in a war crime by settling on this occupied territory. Their mere presence is illegal. And now they've beaten to death an American citizen, apparently. And the media reached out to the Trump regime and said, what do you think about all of this? And they said, quote, we are aware of reports of the death of a U.S. citizen in the West Bank. And the official declined to comment further out of respect for the privacy of the family and loved ones. If you respect the family and the loved ones of the person who was beaten to death, you would be holding Israel accountable, you pieces of garbage. You wouldn't be declining to comment further. So I think, here we have yet another really shocking demonstration of the sheer absurdity of the claim of the phrase, the slogan, America First. This is what you call America First? Settlers in occupied territory, many of whom, by the way, are American citizens. I don't know whether American citizens participated in this particular murder, but many of the people who are illegally in the West Bank are American citizens. Much of the money for constructing these settlements is coming from the United States with the full approval and support of the United States government. And they beat to death an American citizen. And all the Americans can say, the so-called America Firsters in the Trump administration, is we're aware of the incident, of the reports, and we're not going to comment further out of respect for the families of the family and loved ones of the person, the American who was beaten to death. America First, my ass. Something which I think, here's a real admirable piece of journalism that was done in response to this news. Prem Thacker, let me just pull up his article here. This is an article appearing on something called Zeteo. I think this might be, well, I don't know. It's Zeteo, Zeteo.com, published by Prem Thacker on July 9th. We asked Republican senators if they knew how many Americans Israel has killed since October 7th. None of them did. That's right, folks. So here's what that piece of human garbage, Chuck Grassley, who's been in the Senate forever, had to say. When asked if he knew how many Americans the Israeli military has killed, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley replied, I read regularly, and I have not read that. It is 6, Senator. Does that concern you? Zeteo asked. He answered, I have not read that. There are 6 Americans that the Israeli military has killed. Does that not concern you? I have not read that, and I'm not going to answer a question based on information I get from a reporter. Of course, they do this all the time. They answer questions based on information they get from reporters. But okay, fine. Let's say you don't want to answer right now because you want to confirm it. Is he going to go and confirm it, which he easily could do, and then denounce it? Of course not. So then, Prem Thacker, they went to Mark Wayne Mullen, also a senator from Oklahoma. When asked if he knew how many Americans the Israeli military had killed, the senator said, no. Does that concern you? Zeteo followed. I haven't given it much thought, he replied. There are 6 Americans that have been killed. Do you believe that you will field that concern as Prime Minister Netanyahu visits? Quote, you know what I've learned a long time? It never takes someone's word for it until I see it myself. And then the response was a World Central Kitchen worker, Jacob Flickinger, a Canadian-American, was killed. And then he said, zero chance I take your word for it until I see it myself. This was, my God, this was established beyond a shadow of a doubt, months ago. I think it was over a year ago now. And he doesn't know. He doesn't know that this was all over the American press. Then John Thune, he was asked, the Republican Senate Majority Leader of South Dakota, said he wasn't sure if he knew the answer. Rand Paul, this guy's supposed to be, have America First oozing out of every orifice in his body. And he said, I don't have anything for you right now, but thanks, in response to the question. And then Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, and he too said, I don't have anything for you on that. Does that concern you? Zeteo asked. I don't have anything for you on that. Wow. I could go on. There are others here who are mentioned. America First is, my friends, a sick joke. These people don't give a damn about the American people any more than Netanyahu does. So with that, let's move on to the sordid Epstein affair, shall we? So as many of you will know, during Netanyahu's trip to Washington this week, uh, Attorney General Pam Bondi was asked about reports that the Trump administration is not going to release the Epstein files, which apparently a court has ordered them to do. So it's not just a promise that they made repeatedly to the American people, and particularly their supporters in the MAGA movement. But I understand from Judge Napolitano of Judging Freedom, he is a former judge and presumably knows what he's talking about. He said that a federal district court judge has actually ordered this information to be released. I've not seen the order, but I'm prepared to take his word for it. So the Trump administration is just thumbing its nose at the court system yet again in the United States. And even though it promised to do this repeatedly, and, in the course of running for the presidency again, Trump and his surrogates were constantly whipping up, anger about the Epstein files, constantly suggesting that there were people who were high-ranking Democrats or supporters of the Democrats, people like Bill Gates, for example, who were compromised by the Epstein files, who were clients of Jeffrey Epstein, and now they get into power and they just say, well, there's nothing here, folks. We're not going to release these files. We've been ordered by a court to do so. We don't give a damn. There are going to be no more prosecutions. Yes, it's true that many children, female children, that's what they were trafficked to powerful people, but there's no prosecution to be pursued against any of these powerful people. Any of the people, in fact, who had sexual intercourse with these female children, with Jeffrey Epstein acting as the pimp. So there's a lot you could say about this, and much has been said over the last week, and I'm not going to repeat all of the stuff that's been said. Of course, this is just another example of the utter and sheer depravity and mendacity of the Trump regime. But the part about this that strikes me as really mind-blowing is that, so much of it is mind-blowing. I can't say it's the most mind-blowing thing, but it definitely merits comment. And that is that, it is widely believed by many people, and with good reason, that Jeffrey Epstein was working for the Mossad, and perhaps also for other Western intelligence agencies, most notably the CIA and MI6, the British intelligence service. And if you want to know what the case is, what the evidence is supporting that, I suggest you watch an interview that Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone Project did this week on Judging Freedom. He lays out what Professor John Mearsheimer described in another interview this week as compelling circumstantial evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was working with the Mossad, apparently, accumulating devastating, compromising evidence of criminality and depravity on the part of powerful people, and then using that evidence to blackmail them for whatever, in service of whatever agenda the intelligence agencies of these criminal countries was pursuing. So there's no doubt that there's evidence to support that claim, but whether it's true or not, and I don't purport to know for certain whether or not Epstein was an agent of the Mossad, whether it's true or not, it is indisputable that there are many people who believe it, and with good reason. And it is absolutely indisputable that many of those people were supporters of the Trump regime. They're part of the MAGA movement. Okay, so there's also no dispute, it seems to me, that Trump knows this. Trump and his entire inner circle know that there is a widespread view amongst the base of the Republican Party that Epstein was an agent of the Mossad. Okay, so if you have a functioning brain, if you have even the intelligence of a toddler, would you announce that you're shutting down the investigation into Epstein's clients and flouting a court order to release the Epstein files while Netanyahu is in Washington? Why wouldn't you wait a few weeks after Netanyahu is left before revealing that to the public? The fact that you did it while Netanyahu is there is only going to strengthen considerably people's suspicion that Epstein was an agent of the Mossad, and that one of the reasons why Netanyahu came to Washington was to persuade Trump to withhold this evidence and shut down the investigation. I mean, the stupidity of this people just absolutely boggles the mind. For this and other reasons, I'm becoming increasingly convinced, as are I think a number of observers out there, that Trump is insane. I mean, the man has lost his mind. He's, quite possibly in a condition of rapid cognitive decline. We may be on the verge, or we may be in the process of witnessing, Joe Biden 2.0. And in fact, not only do they share in common, evident cognitive decline, severe cognitive decline, complete incoherence, an inability even to articulate a properly constructed sentence. But these people are just colossally stupid. Just unbelievable, man. And it's so bad. This is how bad it is, that there are multiple media reporting that Trump held talks on giving a pardon to Ghislaine Maxwell, the one person, who apparently recruited, quote unquote, recruited. I would suggest a more appropriate term would be entrapped, seduced, coerced female children into becoming basically sex slaves for Jeffrey Epstein and his clients. So one person who's actually doing prison time. She's been convicted. And Trump was actually holding talks with a view to pardoning her. What possible justification could there be, morally or legally or rationally, for releasing this person from prison? I think she's only served like a couple of years in prison, maybe 3. This is a person, if you're ever going to, commit somebody, I'm not a big fan of long-term prison sentences, but that's something which, these are things in which the U.S. courts routinely impose for far lesser offenses than those committed by Ghislaine Maxwell. If you're going to ever impose long-term prison sentences on somebody, surely it would be somebody who did the things that Ghislaine Maxwell did. And yet Trump was holding talks designed, or with a view to possibly giving her a pardon after 2 or 3 years, whatever it is, of prison time. Wow.